Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world, a very warm welcome to Keys, our monthly broadcast to our clients all around the world. We are delighted to have you with us. And those of you who've been with us before will know that each time we take a topic that's of interest to our clients and to organizations in different countries and try to look at it from a few different angles. And today we thought we'd look at tech-celeration. We know that technological change, of course, has been part of history as we've adapted to change over the centuries, but it does feel that at the moment there's quite a bit of acceleration going on. So we thought it might be a good moment for us to all take stock and look at where we are and where we may be heading. And with that in mind, I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel of Ipsos experts with me today. We've got Matt in Chicago, who is going to help us understand public opinion. And he's been thinking about whether public opinion is excited or nervous. So he'll be with us shortly. Then we will be with Becky, who is in Hampshire in the south of England. And she's been looking a bit at our behaviors online, what we're doing now and what might we be doing in a few years' time. We'll then be going to the north of Germany to talk with Nick, who is in Hamburg, and he's looking at what this means for innovation and how technology can perhaps ignite even more exciting new products and services. And then we'll be with Valentina, who is in Madrid, and she's going to be helping us think through the role that human intelligence has to play in all of this. There's time for you to ask questions. In fact, we would love you to think about the topics you'd like to cover more, and we'll, thanks to the glories of WhatsApp, we'll be able to pose those to the panel before we close. So please put them in the chat box. And if you like the slides, the presentations that we're doing, fear not, they will be in your inbox tomorrow, along with the recording of the session. So looking forward to more discussions after the webinar. But let's kick off and see where humans are, where people are when they think about AI. Matt, what are they thinking?
Hey everybody. So we have been studying kind of public opinion around AI for quite some time now. And I would argue that in addition to being a leader in using AI in market research, we are the leader in public opinion about AI as well. We even mixed those things, as I believe we were the first pollster to field a question written in part by generative AI. We asked it for some words that might be used to describe AI, and it gave us a great list of really positive things, and we had to come back and say, okay, you have to give us some negative words too. And you could kind of hear the AI shrug and be like, well, I guess people could think I'm creepy. So we fielded that question. Interesting results. But further, you'll see plenty of AI images in my talk, though not all of them. I used Ipsos Facto to help us get over the blank page of even writing the script, but we also interviewed more than 23,000 real people across 30 markets for this study, the 4th annual Global AI Monitor. So how are the humans feeling? Well, AI has gotten pretty good at a lot of things with images, but maybe not in capturing the emotions people feel. Although this is not entirely off the mark, right? We feel both the wonder and the worry of AI, as we'll talk about more. And that varies a lot market to market. AI is everywhere in 2025, but we started fielding the AI monitor shortly before the launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT, which was a clear watershed moment in the development of generative AI, which is one of the most public uses of AI we see in the world today. In the first wave, we asked about how nervous people were, and 39% of people said they were nervous about AI. By the second wave, we saw a big jump, and that persists at around 53% in this year's report. But in the second wave, we added a companion question because we wanted to see about the positive emotions as well. And we started seeing this tension that we've dubbed the wonder and the worry, as a similar majority of people are excited about AI as they are nervous. In Ipsos Global Trends, we see this tension even more broadly in how people feel about technology writ large. A majority believe that technology is needed to solve the world's problems, but a majority of the exact same people also feel that technological progress is, quote, destroying our lives. That's literally how the question is phrased. At a global level, about half say they are excited and half are nervous. And in some ways, that seems incongruous or perhaps even paradoxical. There are definite regional differences. In the Anglosphere, US, Great Britain, Canada, and Ireland, there's much more nervousness and excitement. in a lot of European markets, we see less nervousness, but also just kind of mid-range excitement. And some markets are much more positive than nervous, especially in Southeast Asia. Japan is a bit of an outlier, neither excited nor nervous. We considered whether this was mostly a correlation of the median age of the market and found that it was not. But in this year's report, we explored a couple of other theories with additional questions. One asked if people trust their government to regulate AI responsibly. And the very low score in the US, where just 31% of people trust the government in this context, could certainly account for some of the high levels of nervousness in that market. Likewise, many of the markets with the highest levels of excitement also have high levels of trust in government regulation. We asked if people trust AI developers to protect their data and privacy, and trust here was lower than trust in government regulation overall, in all but a handful of markets. Perhaps the most compelling reason for the discrepancy in nervousness and excitement from market to market is a simple one. Many of the most positive markets are especially positive about one key topic, the economic outlook. These markets were much more likely to think AI would improve their economies rather than make them worse. And that includes many Asian markets like Singapore and Thailand, but also South Africa and Peru. One facet of our economic uncertainty is related to jobs. There are some very real things we are worried about. Globally and in many markets, more people think that AI will make their local market worse than think it will improve it. And again, we see Thailand and Peru and other Asian and South American markets in this space. Although in nearly every market, more people think AI will improve their own job than make it worse. Whenever we're talking about AI, we talk about how it can be a great additive for humans. And Valentina will get into that a lot in her session later on. But for the moment, we overwhelmingly prefer human-created content. So for this slide, I used a real photograph I took of a real human in person. This is Martin working the soundboard at a concert of my favorite band, Poi Dog Pondering, great local artists. And he is working the soundboard, mixing this very real human experience. And we've seen this in the US consumer tracker, but this was the first time we asked globally about this idea that people prefer human-driven content. And that's true of everything from online news articles or content on marketing websites or movies or advertising content. However, it's easy to expect that as usage becomes more widespread, we will become more comfortable and used to it. Though there's certainly a scenario where a backlash occurs too. My teenagers, who center a lot of their fandom on creators and content, have a very deep aversion to anything that is created with AI and get viscerally angry when I mention using it for anything. Overall, globally, most people think AI will be, and already is to some degree, handling all kinds of tasks in the near future, from online searches to creating advertising content to screening job applications and creating realistic sports content with AI-generated athletes. People are most uncomfortable with the idea of AI generating political ads, writing news stories, screening job applications, and creating disinformation. People are also split on whether they would trust brands using AI in their marketing more or less. And that includes everything from enhancing product images, which, let's face it, is a practice as old as photography and darkrooms and later Photoshop, to writing product descriptions or creating images or videos used in advertising. Part of trust is likely transparency, and it's important to note that companies using AI are overwhelmingly expected by 79% of the world's population to disclose that usage. At least 2 in 3 people said that in each market. Can you tell that this image was made with AI? Yeah, probably. And all of this presents a rather mixed set of signals for brands. We are worried and full of wonder. We expect AI to do a lot of things, but we're unclear whether those things will be positive. In the short term, at least, trust issues abound, and part of that is we don't know who, or frankly even how, to trust in this space. And we have some very concrete worries in many markets about jobs, the economy, disinformation, and privacy. And you can see the full report for a lot more on those and other topics. But one thing seems simple. We want to see the benefits. And I think that will help us all start to lean more into the wonder and get away from some of our worry. And we'll get more into all of the wonder with our next panelists. So thank you very much for letting me walk through our 4th annual Global AI Monitor. And now back to Simon.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for that panorama. You covered a lot of ground in terms of topics and countries, and we'll come back to those before the end of the webinar. And I was struck by your experience of asking AI to accompany you as your questionnaire writer. So that's something which we can, anyone on the call is interested in that, I think we can share the details of that experiment. But as we think ahead to this next wave, or the next wave but one of our study, the next couple of years, what are the 2 or 3 numbers you're going to be looking out for as a keen student of public opinion on this topic?
Yeah, so as we're thinking about how public opinion might change, it's still going to be kind of along those worry and wonder spectrum, right? And I think we're seeing a lot of different things around that. So as someone in the US, I think we're certainly looking at the regulatory landscape and how that could shift with our trust. The US has stated it's going to kind of step back from regulating AI in the future. Europe and other markets are leaning more into that. So we could start to see some kind of dichotomies, again, stretching across the different markets. But again, I think as people get more used to AI and see it more, and as long as the development keeps moving in positive directions, I think we'll see a lot of potential more interest in the wonder side of things, assuming that there aren't big economic challenges that are created by AI in terms of jobs and job losses in various markets. And that will probably play out differently market to market as well. So these are kind of all the things I'll be keeping an eye on as we run the monitor again next year.
Lovely. We're looking forward to that already. Now we're going to build though on the themes that Matt's just been talking about and broaden ourselves out a little bit more, because we've been looking at our tech lives more generally. And Becky, as a keen student of our online behaviour, is going to help us understand what now and what next. Thank you, Becky, for being with us today.
Thanks, Simon, and also thanks to Matt for your last presentation. It's amazing to get that introduction into probably what is the most talked about example of tech-celeration and disruption in the tech space in artificial intelligence. Definitely, as someone working with tech clients, I'm increasingly being asked about disruption and what's going to happen next. And AI is clearly a huge part of that. But it's not just AI, so that's what we're going to talk through today. And I think if we all take just a minute to have a think about our own lives, our own work, our own personal lives, I'm sure many of you will agree that there is this kind of overwhelming sense that technology is evolving, it is becoming more prominent in our everyday. And I'm sure you'll be able to think of lots of examples that maybe you want to celebrate that are really great examples, but also some definitely that are more challenging. So, most of us will be aware of the growing concern around the time that we spend on screens, the content that our children in particular are being exposed to online and the potential impacts of that. But at the same time, I can monitor my health and my well-being much more easily online now than I could do before. And I've got exposure to a whole host of different kind of shopping options, leisure activities, connections and people, and also ways of expressing kind of my fandoms than I ever had before. And at the same time, there's opportunities to educate ourselves and our children and get exposure to the world and learning and education as well in new and innovative ways. So lots of different kind of impact across all of our lives. And one of the really great things that I get to do in my job is to kind of take that feeling or that sense that things are changing and measure it to really understand the scale of that change and the reality of how everybody is experiencing it. So at Ipsos, we benefit from having amazing audience measurement teams across the globe. And through those, we can see many of the differences and the similarities that exist in terms of technology usage. But today I'm going to focus mainly on the UK market. And that's because in the UK, we have a fantastic resource in Ipsos Iris. So Iris is an online measurement solution. It's endorsed by UConn, who are the organisation who set and govern the standards for online measurement in the UK. And it uses passive metering technology to monitor use of websites and apps across smartphones, PCs, laptops and tablets to help give us a really robust picture of online behaviours across those devices and also how they're changing over time. So Iris tells us that around quarter of among the UK population, around quarter of their time is spent online. So that's a quarter of their time that's awake. And this is in line actually with our measurement across KSA and Australia as well. And in the UK, it's growing. So it's up by about 9% year on year. and it rises to around a third of their waking time for 15 to 24-year-olds at over 6 hours of their day on average. And as the technology in our pockets continues to kind of improve in terms of capability, the smartphone is increasingly becoming the online device of choice. And this is the case across all age groups, but it's particularly true for that 25 to 34-year-old age group, who in an average month will spend about 86% of their time online using a smartphone. And this reliance on phones isn't unique to the UK either. In terms of surveys we've conducted, we've recently uncovered that American people are now just as likely to say that their smartphone is essential as they are to say that their car is essential. They're more likely to say their smartphone is essential than they are to say a personal computer is essential now. And so 76% of people in the US would agree that this is the case, and that's risen from 1 in 5 back in 2011 when we conducted this, and technology was quite different. But what are UK people doing online, and how are they spending their time? So when we look at 15 to 24-year-olds and we compare their behaviours with the rest of the adult population, we can see that the picture is quite different. So if we just take a look on the left-hand side of this slide shows the share of total time spent online with different websites and apps. And we can see that YouTube, TikTok and Snapchat alone account for half of that time for 15 to 24-year-olds. These younger adults also have a smaller repertoire of website and app brands as well. So in an average month, the 15 to 24-year-old will spend time with approximately 95 websites or apps, and that compares to 124 for older age groups. So they're loyal, their usage is deep, and it's therefore not surprising that a lot of the focus in the technology space is around consolidation and around brands really helping to build their presence in these spaces where young people are already spending such a large amount of their time and their attention. But it isn't just these platforms. So following Matt's presentation, I'm sure you'll be really interested to know how much usage of OpenAI has grown. Here in the UK, 15 to 24-year-olds are by far the biggest users of OpenAI, rising from around quarter to over 40% monthly reach in a period of 12 months. But where else have we been seeing particular change? So firstly, online shopping. So low-price retailers have seen high levels of growth in the past year. Among 15 to 24-year-olds, monthly use of Temu, AliExpress and Shein are all up by 40% or more. And as shopping habits are shifting, it's not just those retailers that are seeing disruption. It's also the payment providers as well. So monthly reach for buy now, pay later services like Klarna and ClearPay have also increased by around 40% or more over the past 12 months. Social media is prominent, as we've already seen, and on average, 15 to 24-year-olds are spending 4 hours with social media each day, but there are also shifts within this. So using Reddit as an example, we've seen rapid growth and around, in the past 12 months, reach for 15 to 24-year-olds has increased by around 33%. And then there's gaming. So outside of Ipsos Iris, we also run a study for Video Games Europe called GameTrack. And GameTrack monitors gaming across people aged 6 to 64 across the EU5. And we know from that study that there's an estimate that around 128 million people of those age groups play games across the EU5. And that's an increase of 10 million since 2019. Since 2023, we've seen increases particularly amongst women. So there's 3 million more players than there were in 2023. And amongst 15 to 24-year-olds, where there's 2 million more players. We know that smart device playing has been increasing at a rapid rate, and Ipsos Iris also shows us that gaming is increasingly social. Usage of both Discord and Twitch have been increasing significantly, with 25% more increases for those services over the past 12 months. So we've been through lots of change, and there's lots more beyond the small snippets that I've been able to go through today. And when we ask ourselves what's next, the answer is clearly lots more change. But change doesn't necessarily mean replacing what we know. And TV is a really great example of that. So TV content is increasingly extending to be accessed across multiple screens and platforms. And at the same time, other forms of video content are also increasingly being accessed via the TV set. So TV, like all tech, is evolving, and it continues to play a really key role in our lives. And it's a great reminder that often the biggest tech disruption comes from the technologies that show resilience, embrace other players, and continue to evolve. So the tech landscape is fast moving. There are many factors influencing that, but we've just picked out 3 key trends that are kind of top of our mind right now. The first is AI. I don't think there's anyone would disagree that AI is a huge disruptor in the space, but Matt's talked us through that in detail. But for us, just continuing to understand consumers and their perceptions is absolutely critical. The second is discoverability. In an age of AI, social search, increased personalization, the way that brands are able to be discovered is changing, and that will continue to change. And the third is trust. So again, in an age of growing concern over fake news, misinformation and disinformation, technology can play a really, really key role, both in perpetuating that, also hopefully in better serving and protecting audiences going forward. So we look forward with interest to see how that happens.
Well, thank you, Becky. Thank you for that expert tour of the territory, and your point about TV, I think, so well made. Really, it's I think let's say 75 years old and still there, still disrupting. It's just like Bruce Springsteen, also 75 years old, still disrupting. And I think that's a really good marker, actually, that we sometimes need to look at the established channels and how those are evolving. So thank you for that. Tell me, thinking about these trends to watch, and as we look ahead, what's making you excited and what's making you nervous?
Yeah, I think you can't help but be excited by AI. It's impacting so much of what we do. We're being told about all of the opportunities, but there's a lot, it encompasses everything. So there's a lot to kind of go through there. And I know Matt's talked a lot about AI already, and we're going to talk some more. So in terms of the things that are making me nervous, I would say probably the trust trend is most prominent for me. I think as you know, we're becoming increasingly aware that we can't always trust the information that's given to us. Some people believe the things that are not true, and that can have big real life consequences and actions. I think that is the biggest risk, and us being able to find better solutions to make sure that we have control over what people consume around fake news, I think is really important. So I think that's the key one for me.
Thank you. What very wise advice. And just thinking about our colleagues, clients on the call, if you're excited or nervous or just inquisitive, put your comments into the chat, and we will ask the panel some more questions before we go to the end. So thank you for now, Becky. We'll be back with you later. We're now going to be thinking about innovation. We're putting on our metaphorical white coat with Nick, who has been thinking about what new technology, what AI and other techniques at his disposal can do to help us bring new and better services, products to the market. So Nick, tell us what's happening to Tech-celerate innovation.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So Becky brought a wonderful statement to the presentation, saying there's a lot of change, and indeed there's a lot of change. One thing that doesn't change, and that is basically kind of a foundation of innovation, is that innovations will not be successful if they are disconnected with consumers. What that means is that, you know, any kind of innovation which is being developed with any kind of technology or AI, we need to make sure that the innovation is connected to consumers, meaning that it meets their needs and also fulfills the job to be done of a product, and that is important. And if you think about, you know, the AI's role now, there is a risk that AI creates a larger disconnect if it's not used properly. As an example, Harvard had done an interesting research where they basically looked at how consumers truly behave and what does ChatGPT and large language models predict how consumer behavior is. And one thing we need to consider there is that a lot of LLMs are trained on US or Western speaking languages. And what we saw in the study from Harvard is that basically if you just rely on off-the-shelf models, you'd basically get quite a disconnect in predicting how consumers truly believe. So you'd be using basically AI to create a bigger disconnection between the innovation and consumers, leading to failure. That's an important point. Now, if we think about, you know, AI, and I always like to see it, you know, kind of like a child that you need to train it, you need to educate it to make sure that it's powerful and also strong enough. And that AI isn't different. We need to think about the large language models, which are off the shelf, that we need to educate and train them in order to make sure that it's useful. And if we think about generative AI, there are all sorts of different generative AI solutions. There are large language models, as we know, like Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT, but there are also deep learning models, and each have their strengths and weaknesses. So in order to avoid a disconnect with consumers, we need to use the models also specifically to their strengths and benefits. Otherwise, we're going to create a stronger disconnect. So if we're looking at, for instance, deep learning models, they're better in creating numeric data, generating numeric data. Large language models are better in generating lifelike assets or pictures as well as text. And Becky also said, there is a kind of risk understanding, what is truth and what is false. And just to give you an example of what is true and false, when I would ask you which of these two pictures, which is real, you'd probably not easy answer this question because it's not too obvious anymore. AI has accelerated so much that artificial intelligence produces real lifelike pictures. And by the way, the left one is actually real and the right one is AI generated. Now, thinking about how AI is used in the industry and how it's reshaping actually innovation processes, we always need to consider that any kind of AI which we use, we need to have also real consumer responses, because if we just use a large language model or any kind of AI that has been trained on public available data, it's not useful to create insights which are, for instance, undiscovered, such as unmet needs that we need to discover. So that's why we need purposefully fresh consumer data. What we also see in terms of tech-celeration that is disrupting the classic innovation processes is you can start anywhere now in the development process. You can use existing product tests to generate concepts or generate packaging, as well as anywhere in the innovation stage gate, you can go back and forth. So it's not anymore this classic stage gate process. And that's also important. If you want to create, innovations which connect with consumers, we not only need to consider the AI, using the AI in the right way, but also can leverage its benefits. And the benefits are to accelerate the research and also provide deeper insights which connect ultimately better with the consumers. This, as giving an example, we've noticed that using AI in a responsible way can achieve a 9% higher trial potential, as well as 10% higher overall liking in product development, just leveraging AI in the development process. So there is indeed a huge benefit in making sure that you can connect the innovation stronger to consumers if you use it in the right way. Also, there's a big buzz going all around synthetic consumers. Now, there are different approaches to generate synthetic consumers, and synthetic consumers can build upon large language models or deep learning models depending on its purpose. We use synthetic consumers right now in product development to think about how can we achieve faster and more efficient product testing to provide, the same research in a cheaper, efficient, and a faster way. These are not only, some examples on how AI, if you use it in a responsible way and also using fresh consumer data, is a good way to not only accelerate the innovation process, but also rethink the innovation process. We think we are now in a new era of innovation. You can say goodbye to the classic innovation stage gate process because the classic stage gate gates are disappearing. You can do development, optimization, and validation of the innovation quite simultaneously now on the spot. And also we can use any kind of part of the marketing mix to generate new ideas. And I think that's quite powerful and will also empower the insights managers' roles in the future, and already is currently. So what we can also see is, the classic distinguishment of the insights manager's role leading the product development. They're becoming more strategic rather than tactical, reacting. They're becoming more proactive in the whole development process. And they're actually not anymore, classic just looking at the insights, but they're curating them. Many more different possibilities to curate insights and leverage powerful insights and generating product development process, which is much more efficient. So they're becoming more central to that function. In addition, they can also deal with topics such as compliance, ethics, legal matters as well. So they're becoming much more strategic than rather tactical. And the classic boundaries, which we often have in the industry where you have marketing insights and R&D insights, we see these patterns blur because, as I said and described before, you can generate insights in different areas of the process, of the innovation cycle. What is really important as a key takeaway is that if we are, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more now. If we're thinking about, AI, we need to humanize AI. We need to make sure that we're using fresh consumer data, that we also use human intellect to interpret the data. And with that, I'm going to hand over because my colleague Valentina is going to speak more about that in detail.
Oh, absolutely. And before we hear from Valentina, Nick, I know you've been doing a lot of research, and with our strict timings, we only allow you a certain number of minutes. Just from your broader work that you've been doing, is there anything that you might have underlined or brought to the table if we'd given you a little bit more time?
I think what is really important is to consider is that if you look at the large language models, how they're trained, and also the public available information and how much information is being produced, which is already AI generated, I think having truthful data is absolutely important. And one way to make sure you have that is to consider fresh consumer data, which is not specifically AI generated. So have raw consumer responses considered in the innovation process, because as I said in the beginning, we don't want to create a bigger disconnect with consumers. We want to use AI to make sure that we are developing innovations that truly meet consumer needs and basically fulfill the job to be done of our products.
That's wise advice, and I love your point about the sort of maybe the stage gates to the wide open spaces, but with it come new questions and things we need to think about. And talking about new questions and things we need to think about, Valentina, where do humans come into all of this, and what part are we going to play as Tech-celeration potentially continues? Over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And yes, why talk about human intelligence in this Tech-celeration era, right? So Nick just gave us some hints on why human intelligence is important and how we should be doing that. So my objective today is to give you some tips and tricks on how to work with both AI and HI. So what we know is, yes, technology is accelerating our capacity to explore human behavior at scale. And yes, AI promises faster, cheaper, and broader insight. But we also know that speed without understanding is risky. So I want to pose two questions out there while I'm presenting, just to be a little bit provocative, and say to you the first one, which is, are we accelerating toward wisdom or sameness? Why are we doing the things that we are doing now with AI? If this is compromising wisdom or not, we will see that. So wisdom requires context, it requires empathy, it requires perspective. All of these three things AI can mimic, but it is on the human side to understand this better. So we need to take into consideration this. The second question would be, are we gaining deeper, more meaningful understanding of people, or are we just moving faster through shallower waters? So this is very important because we also know that because of speed without understanding, that's not progress, right? It's automation without direction, probably, but it's not getting us anywhere. So I'm gonna bring to you, as AI becomes more powerful, we're hearing these critical questions, right, from the different sectors that we work with. So one is, do we even need to speak to humans anymore? We have heard this. Is a persona bot good enough when timelines are tight? Can we summarize and scale everything that we know? So now that we are in this era of AI, I want to present to you also an experiment that was run by Stanford University and Rice University. And it was training AI with AI generated content, starting with this diverse set of AI generated faces. So as you see there, there's diversity, right? We have from kids to adults. We also have different ethnicities. So you see that and you say, this could be good, right? But by the time we run this, by the 4th generation, nearly every face looked the same. So back to Nick's point, without enough fresh, real data, AI models erode, giving us this flattening cycle similar to inbreeding, letting us to that middle ground that we don't want to be, right? So sameness is the enemy of differentiation. And let's be honest, AI isn't magic, it's math. So AI algorithms are, yes, designed to identify patterns and replicate that success formulas. There is a tangible thread that the unique essence that distinguish one human, I'm not talking about brands anymore, but one human to another, could be diluted into this blend of sameness. So the challenge is how to unlock the vibrant human insight with AI efficiency plus scale. Because of course we have a wonderful tool, AI, LLMs, all this stuff is very, very good. It will help us scale, but how do we balance both the human intelligence and the AI? So I'm bringing 3 principles to keep in mind when balancing both types of intelligence. The first one being true understanding comes not from answering the question, but from questioning the answers. And let me repeat this because it is important. That true understanding, when you are seated, in your desktop and you ask a question to whatever platform of AI you have, you need to question that answer. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from those Western models and you're seated in another culture? So the human ability to improvise, to use that educated instinct, to pick up the unanticipated, to pick up the tension also. So we are working towards understanding that unexpected territory, something that is not obvious, something that is not, driving us towards a middle ground. So true understanding comes from that, from questioning the answers. The second one would be embrace the fringes at the edges. AI, again, brings insight into the middle ground. So it rubs off everything that's in the edge, the fringes, the individual, those unique stories that we're looking for. So something that's counterintuitive, you're probably not going to find in an AI model. The unexpected, where are you going to find that? The contradiction, so you're probably going to have beautiful, very concise answers that could surprise you, but they're not deep enough. So again, this is where the magic lies, going into those edges. And the third one is don't dilute the power of human understanding, augment it. And yes, you can use AI, but we know these systems, they struggle with emotion, the nuance, the context, the cultural relevancy. The human to human approach works best when we want to balance both of them. And finally, it's just a message around synergy, built-in partnership shaped by that synergy, but always, always powered by human intelligence. In the end, these models were created by humans, right? So they have bias, they have different mistakes or things that we don't like, but that we need to be aware of. And we need to go after that, always, always powered by human intelligence. So with that, Simon, I should go back to you, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I've been noting down your key principles. I mean, the point about avoiding the middle ground and staying to the edges, it's kind of reminded me of it when sometimes you're at a tourist place and everyone is in the same place. And it doesn't take too far before you actually come to somewhere quite beautiful. And maybe you're on your own or with very few people. So it's a really good reminder there. If I'm also thinking about what not to do, tell us what we really, really shouldn't be doing based on the work that you've been examining.
Yeah, so we shouldn't be using AI and trust everything AI gives us, right? We need to check back with our humans. We need to understand this from those three elements that I highlighted on empathy, perspective, and the wisdom around things. So it's better if we could do that and also cross-check what AI gives us. And Becky mentioned something that it's very relevant. So trust is something that we should always be, having in mind while turning into AI models to do something. So we need to understand what are these models giving us and how we can trust them, how we can validate that and cross-reference with the actual reality.
Lovely, thank you for that. And we'll come back to Matt actually from where we started. Matt, you've been thinking about this point about the Anglosphere. What's going on there? I mean, you mentioned the economy. What is it? There's something about the language. I mean, all of this stuff is in English. Surely the Anglosphere should be liking AI more. What's happening there?
It's funny that you mentioned language as a starter, right? So, and I'll give you kind of a worry and a wonder example from this. On the worry side, I was given a speech in Lisbon, and Portuguese is not a language I speak. But I took one of the AI language generators and took a kind of pre-made video clip of myself giving an introduction to the speech so that I could at least pretend like I was making a gesture for my audience, right? Except I also then had to apologize to the audience because it translated it into Brazilian Portuguese, which just seems kind of rude, right? Like, it's Portuguese. You should use Portugal Portuguese, but that's sort of beside the point. But on the worry side, or the wonder side of the ledger, there's a Minecraft YouTuber who goes by Quackity, and he's created this online game show that I think he streams through Twitch. And because of AI, he's able to translate that game show in real time across all the languages. And so instead of having content that's only in English and only can be available to a limited portion of the world, he's able to broaden into a global audience through technology immediately. And that has all kinds of interesting implications for content creators and technologists. And Becky was talking about fandom earlier. That's a great topic. And I think there's a lot of interesting ways that we're seeing that. And why then the Anglosphere is more nervous? Again, I think that's going to come back to a lot more like economic questions than like logistics.
Yeah, lovely. Actually, your point about the language thing and the Portuguese thing is well made. I know, Valentina, you were reminding us earlier though that even if we're speaking, let's say, in English, the language might actually be rather different depending on who we are and what we're talking about. That's something you were reminding us earlier, isn't it?
Sure, yeah, and we've been working on this one a lot because, of course, the AI model will get kind of the structure of a language, Spanish versus French or English, but then you have different languages within cultures or even within sectors. So we know there's kind of acronyms and things like that the AI doesn't get quite well if you don't train the model. So it's not around just language as it is literally, but our own kind of language and how we talk to each other in a certain culture is different, right? So we need to think about that.
Absolutely. Context is everything. I won't start talking to everybody in my Oxfordshire accent now, but I can do that if I need to. Becky, I'm talking about universal languages. Gaming. Tell us a bit more about that, because that's something which some people might think. I think you reminded us. It could be seen as it's kind of, let's say, teenage boys in their bedrooms, but it's just become huge. What are the lessons perhaps for people outside the gaming sector to learn from? Because it's just massive, isn't it?
Yeah, I think with gaming, it's just diversified so much, and I think seeing that the growth is on smart devices, the growth is among women. It's just because makes you kind of even more aware of the fact that it's really moved away from that kind of gaming stereotype that you kind of just described. I think the great thing about gaming is it's always at the cusp of new technology, new launches. VR is the place where actually gaming has played a role in kind of social gaming and so on. And I think it's just that the sheer amount of technology that is encapsulated within gaming is a real bonus, but also just the fandom. We're talking about fandom again, but the fandom around those kind of titles and the following that it manages to gain all of those things for gaming just make it such a huge place where, you know, you share those fandoms with your family, you share them with your friends, you expand it out even further. And I think, yeah, that kind of growth of gaming is just really exciting for lots of different reasons. It's a big question.
No, it always seems to almost have a good balance between nostalgia or new stuff, because and there's a really good, powerful blend, it always seems.
Yeah, completely. You look at, you know, Mario movie, but you also look at the Minecraft movie, both being absolutely massive hits, and just show how big it is.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. Now we're going to go on to a technical question. So Nick, yeah, I hope you're ready for this one, because I think it's right up your street. It's about synthetic data. Do we have any data on the accuracy of insights generated from synthetic consumer personas? And if so, how accurate is it?
That's a very good question. So I think, you know, validation is something very crucial. And I see often that when we talk about accuracy, we need to first of all talk about how do we actually validate the results. And when we validate and to provide some accuracy, you always need to consider that you can't just calculate the accuracy of a model based on the so-called seed sample, so basically the training data. I see that very often happen in the industry and also on LinkedIn, where people show a 0.99 correlation, where they're basically just comparing the synthetic data with the training data. And of course, you're going to get a high correlation because you are training the data on it. Yeah, so that's something. First watch out. The second watch out is you need to compare it against the so-called hold-up sample. And the hold-up sample is basically a fresh set of consumers which you're comparing against the behavior. And that's, I think, the 2 points. So depending on the model, depending on the objective. So just giving an example for our product testing, so synthetic consumers, which we're using there, we have done many pilots across more than 100 products, and we get a accuracy of about 95%. Well, the trick here is that we always use, of course, fresh consumers to train the model. So we don't rely on databases, because if you're testing products, you need fresh consumers, and that's crucially, as I already pointed out in the presentation. And that's kind of a good precision, but it's not 100%. Nothing replaces real humans, and real humans are, you know, better source of data always.
Thank you for that. And no, wise advice. I think that's a good marker for us all in terms of just making sure we are on top of the behaviours, as Becky's described, the opinions and the worries that Matt described, and indeed the role of humans in, let's say, organising and curating the processes both you and Valentina have described. I'm going to finish it by asking a question of each of the panelists. It's going to come through from one of the clients on the call, and I think we're coming back to the kind of the idea behind the webinar. You know, we call it Tech-celeration. We debated whether to have a question mark or not, and then we decided actually, no, let's take the question mark off. Things are on balance more accelerating than not, but even within that, there's opportunity for surprises, perhaps surprises about how quickly things are changing, and maybe even surprises about what's staying the same. So I'm going to ask the panel, in order of appearance, to perhaps give me their one big surprise as they've been looking at these topics in recent years. Matt, I'm going to start with you with your surprise of the last period.
So quickly, I'll say that I think my favorite stat out of the AI Monitor is that you hear a lot about AI and worries about discrimination. And so we asked people, are you worried about AI discriminating? And people do not have a high level of trust that AI is not going to discriminate. But then we asked, do you trust the humans? And they have even less trust in the humans than they do in the AI. But I think my most kind of surprising finding is that over the last few years, the worry and the wonder haven't really changed too much. We are both at about the same levels of equal worry and equal wonder. And I think that despite all of the investment and all of the tech advances that are being made, that's not necessarily touching all the humans as much. Like, some of us use AI in our jobs every day, but for a lot of us, it's not really making that difference that we can see. And I think it's important to remember that it's not touching everyone equally in every market. And that I think at a moment, a little bit of the enthusiasm and the momentum is in the business community, and it's outrunning and outpacing where the consumers are on all of this. And I think for all of us, that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about these issues, is that not everybody is quite on the same page we are.
Very wise advice. Thank you for that. Becky, building on that, I'm just I'm taking your advice to heart, actually, Matt, so thank you for that. Becky, what's your surprise?
Well, unfortunately, Matt, there is some overlap. So what I was going to say is I'm forever shocked when I see the amount of time spent online figures, because it feels, you know, a quarter of time spent online, it's a huge amount of growth since where it's been, but for me, it feels low. And that's because I am in that tech London bubble. And not everybody is like me, and I think that is just the absolute crucial thing for us to always remember, is the fact that we have to ask everybody, because we are so different. And we've run in the past studies for our clients which are all about that. It's about, let's compare kind of decision makers, people in the ad industry, for example, or people in kind of technology with the general public, just to show how stark that is. But yeah, I think for me that quarter of our lives on waking lives online might be growth, but for me it still feels low.
Well, isn't it the case, thinking about the TV point, I think linear TV, in terms of, you know, watching it live, was more resilient than many so-called experts predicted, wasn't it?
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've only very recently had Adolescence, big show here in the UK, and I know in other countries abroad, topped the charts in terms of overnight viewing, and it was a big news story, because linear TV just didn't hold up for those big reach programs.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, Nick, what's your big surprise for us today?
Well, I mean, the biggest surprise is for me still continuously is how quick AI engines are developing. I mean, there's no status quo. You read one study about, you know, where different AI engines are compared, and that's already outdated because there's a new update. So for researching, choosing a model and development of a solution, you're always continuously updating yourself in terms of what is new, which engine is the best, which are the strengths and weaknesses, and something where you thought, okay, this engine doesn't work well, this model doesn't work well, that's, you know, updated and it's already superior. I mean, look at Claude, for instance. Claude Opus is very strong and also good in other aspects than Gemini 2, and then so it's a continuous race among the different large language models which we see, and it's continuously evolving. There's a great example of Will Smith eating spaghetti. There's an AI video on that, and how quickly those AI videos have evolved, and that's, you know, the pace is incredible.
Oh, okay, thank you. It's a good reminder. I had a good corollary actually with what with Matt and Becky have been saying as well. So in terms of the person on the street may not see all of these engines doing their regular updates. Valentina, your surprise, please.
Well, I would have to say it's a mix of everything that you guys have said, but one of the things that is kind of sticking with me every time is that speed of the AI and the LLMs coming up and the things that they could do, but also in the contradiction you find every time a new model emerges. So yeah, so you have to test that out. You have to really go back and see, oh, this is good for a certain opportunity or reason behind that, but it's not like you can use everything for everything, right? So, but the fact that we as humans are, you know, yes, we like that, but then we, you know, kind of don't. So the contradiction, the tension that it generates in us, this is something that I'm really keen to understand better every time we have this, you know, immersion of LLMs coming our way. But yeah,
Thank you for that. Yeah, that sort of tension will be with us as we continue to grapple with these subjects. So I hope to all the clients on the call, this has been useful for you today. We've really enjoyed putting this together. Thank you so much to the team for your presentations and your advice and your surprises. That's been great to have that. We've also got some show notes, so if you want to go deeper into the survey, into the trends, or indeed to some of the more technical topics, that will be with you tomorrow in your inbox. So watch out for that, along with the video of the recording. And then on the next slide, we invite you to join us next time, where we will be looking at where we are halfway through the year. And we're going to be thinking about the uncharted territory that perhaps is where we are right now, and thinking about where we may need to turn and think about things differently. So we're going to be looking at examples from the US, we're going to be looking at corporate reputation, we're going to be looking at the latest situations in Southeast Asia in terms of where consumers' minds are and where the opportunities lie. So I hope you join us for our mid-year review a little bit after halfway through the year on the 10th of July. But for now, thank you for being with us. We'll be sharing the material tomorrow, and thank you also to the team for putting all of this together. We'll see you all soon. All the best.
Thank you.